I received a review copy of That Time You Killed Me from the publisher, so thanks to Pandasaurus Games. An abstract game where you play simultaneously on 3 different boards representing time zones, with decisions in the past directly impacting on the game state in the present and the future. A time-travelling twist on traditional strategy games. That's the hook. I'm Adam Porter, and I like to look at games through the lens of a game maker. Devising a fun game is just part of the process. Creating an impactful product is the real challenge. That Time You Killed Me is a 2-player game from Peter Hayward and Pandasaurus Games. It's an abstract strategy game, which means it belongs in the same family as chess, checkers, and Go. What? You didn't get that from the cover? Well, we'll come back to that. That Time You Killed Me is played on 3 boards, the past, the present, and the future, and both players start with 1 pawn on each board. On your turn, you can activate one of your pawns in 1 time zone, and the goal is to push all of your opponent's pawns off 2 of the boards in order to win the game. The most basic action available to you is a simple move up, down, left, or right, but you can also jump forward in time to the equivalent space in the next time period. Or you could jump backwards in time, leaving a copy of yourself in the period that you vacated. In this manner, you can have more than 1 pawn on a single board. And if your opponent ever pushes 2 copies of you into the same space, a paradox occurs, which kills both of your pawns. At the end of your turn, you move your focus token to a different time zone, which means you can never play on the same boards in 2 consecutive turns. And that's the basics of the game. But there's a lot more content in that box, there's lots more to explore, and we're going to be covering a lot of that extra content throughout this review. The abstract strategy genre includes the earliest examples of tabletop games, Mayan, Senet, checkers, and backgammon. But such games present something of a dilemma for a modern game maker. Upon release, the team behind Othello trademarked the marketing slogan, "A minute to learn, a lifetime to master." 50 years ago, when this game was first published, that slogan was a fantastic hook, but in 2022, that's only partially so. Taking just 1 minute to learn is still a tremendous boon, but the second part of Othello's slogan is less appealing. In 2022, modern gamers rarely devote an entire lifetime to a single game, and if they're going to do so, it's likely to be a traditional classic like chess or Go, where players can study vast tomes covering strong strategic openings and counters, or it might be a collectible card game like Magic the Gathering, or something with miniatures like Warhammer, where a constant stream of new content constantly rejuvenates and reinvents the game. Aiming for the status of lifestyle game is almost certainly too lofty a goal for a modern abstract strategy game. I don't doubt that Yinch or Camisado or Shobu are complex enough to justify years of study and academic writing. But modern gamers are easily distracted by the slew of shiny new titles hitting the market every month. And most modern abstracts are going to be brought to the table infrequently, appreciated for the novel twist that they offer, but never really explored with the rigour that they deserve. And there's nothing exceptional about that, of course. That's the plight of the vast majority of modern board games from all genres. But the unique challenge for abstract strategy games is that, by definition, they're devoid of theme. Modern board games are produced at an incredible pace. Over 1,000 new releases each year. Does that mean 1,000 innovative new gameplay mechanisms added to the game designer's toolbox? No. In fact, a year in board games frequently introduces 0 standout new mechanisms. True innovation is a rare occurrence. Micro-innovations abound, and designers constantly iterate on old ideas, but as more games are released, it's harder and harder to find exciting mechanical hooks. So publishers fall back on theme. You've already played a game which functions just like this one, but have you played it in space? And of course, the maker of an abstract strategy game can't get away with such sleight of hand. There's no theme to hide behind. So to keep their products fresh, inventors and publishers are applying lessons learned from modern board games. The chess-like game Hive dabbled with the introduction of additional components, a ladybug, a woodlouse, equivalent to introducing a new playing piece, the jester perhaps, into a new edition of chess. Onitama grew in a similar manner, with multiple expansions incorporating new cards and components to change up the gameplay. Azul introduced a very Euro drafting mechanism, and individual player boards similar to those seen in a roll and write game, a genre of game which is extremely popular right now. So this hybrid approach seems to be working. Games like Azul and Patchwork and War Chest have achieved great commercial success as well as critical acclaim. And That Time You Killed Me follows a similar course. The stuff that we're borrowing here is the styling of campaign and legacy games. Boxes within boxes, hidden messages and frequent commands to stop reading. The package implies a sense of progression and narrative which isn't really there. My City is a tile-laying game with multiple modules, each introducing new rules, just like in That Time You Killed Me. But in My City, the events of one game directly impact on the next. And that's not the case with That Time You Killed Me. Here we're closer to the Hive or Onitama model, a base game with a number of additional components to change up the mode of play, but no real progression between. Of course, in this case, all of that expanded content is contained within the core box, and there is a ton of expanded content. The box essentially includes a base game and 4 boxes of additional components. Because of the lack of narrative or progression, I don't feel the need to keep the nature of the additional content secret. So I'm going to dive straight into those boxes and give a very broad overview of what's inside. So this is your spoiler warning. If you want to discover that additional content for yourself, perhaps this isn't the video for you. Chapter 1 allows you to plant a seed as an action on your turn. And this immediately generates a shrub in the next time zone and a tree in the zone after that. Pushing opponents into shrubs will kill them, and pushing a tree onto an opponent will also eliminate them from the board. Chapter 2 introduces statues, which can be pushed or pulled across the board. When a statue moves in a time zone, the equivalent statue in a later time zone is also going to move, potentially forcing pawns off the board. Chapter 3 introduces elephants. Now these are neutral playing pieces, but you can take control of an adjacent elephant by placing a hat on it. This affects elephants in each of the later time zones too. Once you've taken control of it, you can move an elephant in an attempt to trample your opponent's pawns. Chapter 4 contains rules to combine any 2 of the previous modules, as well as a series of envelopes with special action cards and new endgame goals. The lack of progression opens up the possibility of swapping out your opponents between games. There's no need to stick with the same opponent throughout, as in many legacy games. But if you want a broader competition, a meta game linking the results of one game to the next, then That Time You Killed Me does at least offer up a system of achievements. Succeeding at a specified goal, even if it's not a win condition, allows you to sign your name on an envelope to reveal some new content. And in the absence of an overall win condition for a run of That Time You Killed Me matches, achieving the largest number of unlocks is a satisfying goal. I want to explore the game from first impressions through to completion of the first game and exploration of the included content. A purchaser's initial contact with a game is usually the box cover. Before we see anything else, before we learn anything about the gameplay, we see that box. Now I had no idea what this game was about when it landed on my doorstep. I'd glanced at the cover online, I thought the graphic design was pretty cool, and I agreed to review the game on that basis. Now the graphic design definitely is cool. I love the bold colours and the surreal image. It's exciting and horrific, with a retro appeal recalling Saul Bass's movie posters for The Man with the Golden Arm, Rear Window and Vertigo. But I still had no idea what the game was about. There's a time component for sure, indicated by those egg timers on the box, and there's violence, swords and murder. So at a guess, I'd have opted for a mafia game, like The Resistance or Secret Hitler. Social deduction games come in small packages, so I was surprised when it arrived to discover a box the size of Ticket to Ride. Flipping to the reverse of the box, I was still a little bit confused. The image of gameplay apparently shows a chessboard split across 3 sections with a single pawn on each. There are several references to a campaign and secret content. So an abstract strategy campaign game? But that hidden traitor thought still lingers as the gamebox hints at a degree of deduction and mistrust. Someone is going to murder you. That person is someone you know. In fact, it's the person you're going to play this game with. Now, you might not be the person who invented time travel. You might be the murderer. So how do you know if you're the smartest person of all time or the traitor who killed them? Well, there's only one way to find out. My social deduction assumptions fell away when I noticed that this was a two-player game, a fact which could have been noted more prominently on the box cover. All in all, the box cover did an incredible job of drawing me in. The information could have been a little bit clearer, but it certainly looked intriguing. I was excited to get started. Opening the box, you're presented with 4 beautifully illustrated mini boxes and a large rulebook. And thankfully, the rulebook is a delight. It's clearly laid out, it progresses logically from one rule to another with plentiful helpful illustrations, and it's funny. The game has no theme, but the rulebook works really hard to convince you that it does. I couldn't help but get caught up in this wacky tale of competing inventors, time travel and paradoxes. What the game lacks in cohesive narrative, it sure makes up for in atmosphere. Of course, none of this slick presentation matters very much if the gameplay itself isn't engaging. So let's chart the game on my engagement ladder. So I score each game between 0 and 3 in 5 different categories. The score of 10 or above will sit on the highest rung, indicating a real favourite with me. For thematic immersion, I'm giving the game a 1. And that's a high score for an abstract game, and it's primarily because of the intuitive use of time travel, with actions in the past rippling forward to the present and the future. Of course, the actions themselves are entirely meaningless outside of a grid-based strategy game, but the time travel setting itself is enough to allow a degree of immersion which is uncharacteristic of the genre. For interaction, it's a 3. This is an elimination game, and it's brutal. Every move you make directly affects your opponent. The abstract strategy genre contains some of the most interactive games ever invented, and That Time You Killed Me is just such a game. For challenge and stress, the game scores fairly high. The most stressful games are those where you're unable to do everything that you wanted, and that's not the case with a game like this. Here your turns are logical and linear. There's an optimum move to make, and you just need to be clever enough to spot it. But tension does arise when you can see the opponent closing in on one of your pawns in a certain time zone, but you need to move your focus elsewhere, leaving your pieces vulnerable to elimination. In-game feedback here is fairly low. There are no rewards for clever plays beyond the immediate satisfaction of knocking out your opponent's pieces. But the overall package does offer up some nice feedback to the players, particularly if you're working through the achievements in the final module, each of which rewards you with new content. For meaningful decisions, it's a 2. This is a straight up game of skill. The most strategic player is gonna win, and every choice you make will directly impact on your progress towards success or failure. The only reason it's not a 3 is that the expanded content adds a degree of chaos and bloat, which makes forward planning really challenging. Sure, you could map out several turns ahead of time, but the effort involved just doesn't seem worth it. Totaling the scores, That Time You Killed Me scores a massive 10 points and it sits atop the ladder. It's a really engaging game. So let's return to my product design checklist. Is the game innovative? Yes. The split board spanning 3 time zones is a clever implementation of time travelling concepts, and time travel is notoriously difficult to simulate effectively in tabletop games. And as such, it's a really underutilised theme. The effect of actions in the past rippling forward through the present into the future is certainly a standout mechanism and an innovation. But the most significant innovations on display here are really in the presentation and the packaging of the product. This is simply not how you package an abstract strategy game. This is how you do it. Or maybe this. Until now. The stunning graphic design and clever writing in That Time You Killed Me has lifted the bar, and the packaging of the additional content demonstrates how innovations from modern games can be applied even to the most ancient genre of abstract strategy games. Does the game fulfill a need? Now, I'm not so sure about this one. The world has plenty of abstract games, and as discussed earlier, most of them haven't really received the attention they deserve. Do we really need more? The gaming world also has many campaign games in lots of different genres. I'm not sure anyone was asking for a combination of these two things. I've discussed in previous videos that many games released today are born from inspiration and experimentation. But the strongest products arise from empathy with consumers, understanding their needs. I have the feeling that this game was primarily a product of experimentation. A team of creatives throwing everything they had at a project without really questioning whether there was really a desire for such a thing. That said, I could argue an alternative viewpoint. Perhaps the traditional abstract strategy genre has stalled. In their heyday, these games were the pinnacle of gaming, but recent years have seen few standouts. Tak and Shobu probably being the most notable. If the genre is to survive, it needs to evolve, and hybrid games like Azul, War Chest, and now That Time You Killed Me are important steps forward. The abstract strategy genre deserves exploration and development if it's not to be left behind. And the aforementioned games demonstrate that there is a market for such titles. Is the product able to grow with its user? Yes, this is a massive strength of the package. Abstract strategy games are extremely replayable even without any expanded content at all. But this package says forget that, we're throwing everything in there. Players can adapt the rules in so many different ways to suit their own preferences, or just to provide variety from one session to the next. I can't see why the game would ever need new content beyond this base set. But neither can I rule it out. The project has been bold enough this far, why not throw a few more modules into a box and call it an expansion? Branding. The graphic styling of the game box and components is bold and distinctive enough that I could easily see it becoming a brand. Even entirely unrelated games from disparate genres with diverse themes could form a family of games if presented with a similar Hitchcockian aesthetic. It's impressive that the colours of the game are borrowed directly from the Pandasaurus logo, strengthening the brand of the publisher at the same time. So all that remains is to plot this game on my idea execution matrix. Best-selling products tend to have fantastic core concepts coupled with outstanding execution. And That Time You Killed Me is a good idea. A clever time travel mechanism with loads of replayable modules and very engaging gameplay. I haven't promoted it to the highest point on the idea axis because I can't help but feel that the game falls between two stools. It's a very traditional abstract game packaged like a modern thematic game. Can't escape the feeling that some gamers are going to be disappointed to discover the abstract gameplay once they get over that beautiful art and witty storytelling. Equally, fans of traditional abstract games are going to find this one a challenge to fully adopt. It's not as elegant and streamlined as the best in the genre. Most games of this ilk feature a single mechanism. Consider Shobu with its similar split board mechanism. As with this game, players attempt to push each other off the board, but that's all they do. The quantity of expanded content might be off-putting for some purists, and I have to admit, I'm one of them. This won't be the game I reach for if I'm looking for a traditional abstract challenge. I'm going to go for Quarto or Yinch or Camisado. I'll be reaching for That Time You Killed Me when I want a novelty. But there's no doubt that the execution here is exceptional. The title, the artwork, the boxes within boxes, the drip feed of extra content, the humour, the atmosphere. It's exciting and innovative, and it lifts the product immensely, pushing it into the orange section of the grid and predicting a massive hit. I think That Time You Killed Me will sell very well indeed. Pandasaurus have masterfully taken an odd little concept and turned it into something truly desirable. Now, if you enjoyed this review, please let me know in the comments. Go back, watch some of my others, hit like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. All the best.